The Christmas season, as you so well know, is full of notable and memorable characters. Last Sunday, Rebecca talked about John the Baptist, who certainly is an interesting character. Front and center, of course, are Mary and Joseph. Then there's evil King Herod, who decides to kill all children 2 years of age and under because he knows that one of them is going to be the Messiah. They're the shepherds out in the field who hear the angel chorus and rush to Bethlehem to see this child in the manger and then return glorifying and praising God. They're the wise men who travel from Persia some 1,500 miles to the house where Mary and Joseph and the 2-year-old child are and bring him gifts and then return to Persia, to that pagan land, to tell the story of Jesus. So many notable and memorable characters that are familiar to you. Less familiar, more obscure in most of our understanding of the Advent Christmas season are Zechariah and Elizabeth. I titled this sermon, A Woman Named Elizabeth. It really should be titled, A Couple Named Zechariah and Elizabeth. What I want to do this morning is glean for you and me 4 insights from their story. 4 insights for you, for me, from the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. First of all, God is a God of surprises. God is a God of surprises. I mean, if you read this text, you come to understand that this is an old couple. In fact, the phraseology that's used in the Gospel of Luke is very old. Luke says that Zechariah and Elizabeth were childless and very old. And the chances of them having a child are minuscule. There is almost no chance in the world that though they pray, though they beg, though they wish, that Zechariah and Elizabeth are going to have a baby. But then the angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah in the temple and announces to him that Elizabeth is pregnant. Can you imagine being Zechariah? Can you imagine being in that temple and the angel comes to you and he says, I got to tell you something, your wife is pregnant. She's going to have a baby. Now again, you're an old man and your wife's an old lady. And the angel comes and tells you that you're going to have a baby. And I know how Zechariah felt, and I imagine he thought to himself, come on now. No way. Impossible. Just not going to happen. One New Testament scholar says that Zechariah and Elizabeth are the New Testament's version of Abraham and Sarah. Remember Abraham and Sarah? They too were childless. They too wanted a child of their own. Couldn't have one. Grew in age. And then finally one day 3 visitors comes to them and announces to them both that Sarah is going to have a baby, have their child. You know what Sarah does? Remember that story? You know what Sarah does? She laughs. She laughs when the angels tell her that she is going to have a baby. And I thought about that when I thought about Zechariah and Elizabeth and Abraham and Sarah, and I realized that the world laughs at a lot that you and I claim about God, don't they? A lot of the things that you claim about God and a lot of the things that I claim about God and a lot of the things that the Bible claims about God are laughable to the world. Now here's my litany for the truths of God and the surprises of God. Dare we say that God can bring healing when medical science cannot? Yes. Dare we say that God can take the cast-offs of the world and turn them into history-changing agents? Yes. Dare we say that God answers many prayers in a way that defies reason? Yes. Dare we say that God can help us face enormous and seemingly debilitating circumstances in our lives with faith and courage and hope? Yes. Dare we say that the most unworthy of characters can, by God's grace, become people who live with zest for God's will and God's ways? Yes. Dare we say to the world that which reason defines as absolutely true, that which logic boundaries as the only possible way of seeing things, is not the case when God breaks through. God can break through our seemingly defined world with all kinds of wondrous and miraculous surprises. Now, it's not always dramatic in your life or in mine, is it? It's not an Abraham and Sarah story necessarily. It's not a Zechariah and Elizabeth story necessarily. You've heard me say it countless times. I'll say it again. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you will see every single day of your life, and I will see every single day of my life the surprises of God. the serendipities of God. Second insight is that Zechariah and Elizabeth kept the faith. Zechariah and Elizabeth kept the faith. To be childless in that culture, I don't know if you know this or not, to be childless in that culture was a grave failure. It wasn't just the emotional turmoil you felt because you couldn't have a child. In Jewish culture of that time, it was a grave failure. One scholar says this, in Elizabeth's time, childlessness was not just misfortune, it was a disgrace, punishable by divorce. Another scholar says, in that time, childlessness was considered a sign of God's judgment for sin. Year after year after year, while praying for a child to come, Zechariah and Elizabeth felt castigated by their community, treated as unfaithful. Zechariah, a priest, and considered unfaithful because they couldn't have children. To not have children in a Jewish culture was considered the height of disgrace and dishonor to God. And yet Luke tells us that they didn't waver in their faith. Listen to this. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. When they could have railed against God, when they could have shouted out for all the world to hear how unfair life was to them, when they could have said, Lord, if you really love us so much, why can't we have a child? They didn't. They were obedient and they kept the faith. You've heard me say before that there are two kinds of faith. There is faith that is strong as long as life is sunny and bright and good. And there's faith that is strong when life is not so sunny and not so bright and not so good. That's the faith of Elizabeth and Zechariah. You remember the name Amy Copeland? I'm not going to have you raise your hands. But I can always tell by the expressions of people, if they're awake. I can tell the expressions of people. Whether when I ask a question like that, they recognize, do you know the name Amy Copeland? Well, Amy Copeland was the 24-year-old University of Georgia student who in May, while on a nature outing, got on a homemade zip line, now you know the story, and went down that zip line and it broke and she fell into the river, cut her leg. An infection developed. She went to the hospital. You know the story now. This was May of this year. Went to the hospital, and very shortly thereafter they diagnosed her as having flesh-eating disease. She battled the failure of 5 organs. They ended up, as you so well know, amputating both hands, both feet, and her left leg. I mean, I can remember when I saw that on television and read that, I shook my head and thought, how in the world does a 24-year-old get through that? This vivacious 24-year-old. Well, I saw an interview with Amy Copeland the other night on Aaron Burnett on CNN. I don't know if you watch Aaron Burnett or CNN or not. But she had an interview with Amy Copeland. Now, we're in November, now December. This happened in May. And she's interviewing Amy Copeland, who's in an automated wheelchair, who's awaiting the 3 prosthetics that are going to come for her 2 hands and for her foot. And she interviewed her. I want to share with you some of the things that Amy Copeland said. She said she's going back to school. She's going to finish her master's. And not only that, she's going to get a second master's. Now listen, folks, keep in mind, when did this happen? This happened in May. This interview was this week. She's going back to school and going to complete her master's. In fact, she's going to get a second master's, and she intends to work with people with disabilities. She said she loves life, she cherishes life, she relishes every day as a gift. She said, I thank God I'm alive. She said, I've had hard moments, obviously. It's necessary to experience such moments. We need to grieve. Listen to this. But over the horizon, there's always light. There's always hope. This is a 24-year-old University of Georgia college student who has lost her limbs. And who can say there's always hope over the horizon. Who goes on to say, my desire in life is to help people with disabilities, physically, emotionally, spiritually, just as I've been helped. And who says this, I think it is really important that I do all I can to bring hope to other people. that I bring hope to other people. There's the kind of faith that hangs in there when life is good and sunny and bright. And then there's the faith of Zechariah and Elizabeth, which hangs in there when life is not so sunny and not so bright and not so good. And there's the faith of Amy Copeland. And the question for you and the question for me, what kind of faith do we have? Third insight is Elizabeth was Mary's go-to person. Elizabeth was Mary's go-to person. You know the story. Elizabeth is in the 6th month of her pregnancy. Mary is told by Gabriel that she's going to have the Messiah. She immediately packs her stuff and rushes off to a little village outside of Jerusalem where Zechariah and Elizabeth live. Now, here's the hitch to that. It seems so simple in the story. Mary got her stuff together and she goes off to see Elizabeth. It is 80 to 100 miles from Nazareth to just outside Jerusalem. It's a 9-day walk across 3 mountain ranges. This wasn't just putting your stuff together and getting in your car and driving from Cordova to Germantown or Germantown to Cordova. This was wanting to see Elizabeth so badly that this young 15-year-old walked 9 miles, probably with pilgrims going to Jerusalem, across 3 mountain ranges to see the person who was the encourager of her life. One contemporary gospel says that when Elizabeth speaks to Mary, she says this, "Listen, child, you don't have to be afraid. You've been blessed. Blessed by God. Don't you see it? Don't be afraid. You've been chosen. Above every other Jewish girl living today, you've been chosen to bear the Messiah. Mary, you are so blessed." And those are the encouraging words that Mary needed to hear. Now here's my question to you. Who's your encourager? Whom would you walk 9 days over 3 mountain ranges to see? What person in your life is your grand encourager? My guess is you have one. And my hope is you thank God for that person. Whoever that person is that you would walk 9 days and over 3 mountain ranges to see is a gift to God in your life, as in mine. And hopefully we're thanking God for those persons who lift us up and feed our spirits and, as Elizabeth did to Mary, encourage our souls. And what's the corresponding truth of that, you know? People need us to be encouragers. I want to tell you something. There are people you know and there are people I know this Christmas season who don't need a material thing from me. But they need my time. And they need my encouragement. And there are people in your life who don't need a material thing from you, but they do need the gift of your time and the gift of your encouragement. The greatest gift you can give this season is your time and your encouragement to somebody who needs it. And it doesn't cost a cent. And finally, I would say this morning, Elizabeth accepts her humble role in God's plan. Elizabeth accepts her humble role in God's plan. Another part of the story that is probably unfamiliar to most of us is that we don't know that Elizabeth got to see John grow up. We never hear from her again. In this story found in Luke 1, once Elizabeth tells the priest that he's to be named John at his circumcision when he's 8 days old, we never hear about her again. And we don't know that Elizabeth got to see her boy grow up. We know he grew up. We know he baptized Jesus in the River Jordan, but we don't know that Elizabeth saw that. You see, she was an old woman by the gospel story. She was going to have a baby, thankful to God for it, name him John, but she might not see that boy grow up. And yet Elizabeth did what God wanted her to do. One of my favorite Methodist ministers is James Howell, who is senior pastor of Myers Park United Methodist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he has a blog that I read fairly regularly. And now he's blogging on this question, what does Jesus want for Christmas? I like that question, don't you? What does Jesus want for Christmas? And here are his first 3 answers. He wants us to take time to be with Him this season. That's what Jesus wants for Christmas. He wants us to let the Word of God be the main thing in our lives. That's what He wants from us this Christmas. He wants us to remember that it's His birthday and not ours or our families, and thus to be generous in ways that honor Him. Here's what I think Jesus wants this Christmas from Richard Smith and from you. He wants our humble servant commitment. He wants the heart of Elizabeth, a heart that says, Lord, wherever you need me, I will go. Lord, whatever you need done that I can do, I will do. Lord, wherever you need to send me, send me. Lord, whatever little task you have or great task you have that is within my skills, let me do it. The gift you can give the Christ this Christmas and the gift I can give the Christ this Christmas is the gift Elizabeth gave to God. And that is to be His faithful, humble servant, doing what He needed done. Well, they may not be right up there with Mary and Joseph. You don't see Zechariah and Elizabeth in most children's Christmas stories. You don't see them alongside the shepherds or the wise men anywhere at the manger. But they're critical to the Christmas story, because their story reminds us that God is a God of surprises, and He breaks through our lives in wondrous and remarkable ways. Their story reminds us that we need to keep the faith no matter what life brings. Their story reminds us that encouragers are God's gift to us, and we can be encouragers to others. And they remind us that the single most important gift we have to give to God, to the Christ, is our humble, faithful servanthood. May this be true of you this Advent Christmas season, and may these truths apply to me this Advent Christmas season. Thanks be to God. I call your attention now to your hymnals.